In this video, we're going to learn the basics of working with splines. Alright, so splines are an important piece inside of 3ds Max because they can help us solve specific shapes that we need to create. For one, for me, I like to use splines while creating pipes or creating wires. They can be very flexible and they can give us the exact shape that we would want. So let me show you how to work with splines and how they can be helpful. So I'm going to go to the Create panel, and under that we're going to go to Shapes. And here you'll see that we have lots of different kinds of splines that we can start out with. The most common one that I like to use is a line. And what this allows me to do is actually draw inside of the viewport the shape that I desire. Now I can continue to click points until I go back to the first vertex, which is denoted in yellow in our scene. Now once I click on that, it asks me if I want to close the spline. In this case, I do want it to close the spline, so I'm going to hit yes. So here I have this shape, and I want to begin modifying it. Let's say that I want to curve this shape out instead of making it so linear. What I can do is I can right-click to end the line creation process and then go to the Modify panel, and I can activate vertex mode. So a line does have its own set of sub-objects. So we have vertex, segment, and then we have spline. The spline is going to be the entire spline itself that was created. A segment is going to be an edge between two vertices, and then a vertex is a single point. Now with vertex mode active, I could select all of these vertices, and I can right-click to bring up my quad menu, and right in here you can see that I can switch the type of tangent that we're using. Right now it's using corner, which gives us this linear shape between the points. If I wanted to smooth it out, I would choose smooth. You can see how that's changed there. Or, let me hit Control Z one time, I could right-click and use Bezier, and you'll see that it begins to smooth it out, but I get these handles that I can now control with my Move tool activated. And I can start to modify the shape of this. Now, in order to move these handles in a free direction, I need to make sure that the Y and X value or handle is activated. Right now, the Y axis is activated because it's in yellow. So click right here in the middle, and I can now move these handles in any direction. So I can begin to make the shape, and I didn't intentionally make this into a tree or mushroom shape, but you can see how we can begin to modify that and create something like maybe a logo or something like that. Okay. So now that we've kind of learned the basics of this, let me talk about one more. Let's select all these vertices. Let's right-click and go to Bezier corner. This one's really neat because it allows me to create curved edges, but what it does is it breaks the handles. So instead of them being attached together, I can now kind of make some really neat curved shapes. So if I wanted this tree to look a little bit more ominous and create some very sharp curves in this, I could do that. So now this is a tree that I wouldn't want to touch at all, just based on the curvature of that. So you can see how we've modified that shape just by changing the tangents. So what are some ways that we can take this line and make it into 3D geometry? Because after all, this is a 3D modeling program. So one way that I could do that is go to rendering, and I could turn it on and enable it in the viewport. And what it does is it actually creates this thin geometry based on our parameters here. Let me hit Alt-W to maximize this. I can adjust the thickness of that, and so now I've got this shape in kind of a tube-like fashion. I could adjust the amount of size that it has to increase the smoothness, and then I can go down to interpolation, and I can adjust that. There we go, and make it really, really smooth in between. So I could do something like that. Or what I could do is turn off that in the viewport, and I could apply a modifier to it. So let's do a modifier like extrude. Notice that it creates geometry. I can adjust the amount, and now I've created thickness out of this 3D object. So I could do this for something like a 3D logo or something like that. Let me show you another cool use for splines. Let's delete that. And I'm actually going to delete this line altogether. So let's delete that. Let's go to our front view by hitting F on the keyboard. And I'm going to use a line, and then I'm going to turn on my grid snapping. So let's left click on this grid snapping right here and right click on it. And let's use grid points. So that way I can just snap to those. So I'm going to left click right here in the center, and I'm going to create a shape that kind of looks like maybe a vase. So something like this. And I'm only going to create 1/2 of the vase. So I'm going to go right up to the top here and hit close spline, and then I'm going to right click, and there we go. Now I could go to vertex mode by hitting 1 on the keyboard, and I could come in and I can convert them all to Bezier corner, and then I can come in and start to move those points around. Let's turn off that snapping so I can start to create a really neat little shape here out of our for a vase. So something like that, and there we go. And you can see that I've created 1/2 of the vase, but what I want to do is I want it to spin 360 degrees and create geometry around this center point here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the modifier list, and I'm going to type in LA for lathe, so LATHE, and you'll notice that it creates a 3D model. Let's hit P on the keyboard to go to our perspective view. Now it doesn't look anything like a vase, but with this lathe tool, what I can do is I can actually adjust the direction in which this is being lathed out. So let's hit Min on the alignment, and you'll see that now this looks like that shape that we had from before. I could also adjust the direction, so in how this is actually lathing out. I would want to use the Y, but let's switch it over to Min again. And there we go. Let's adjust how many segments we want on this to make it really round. Now this adjusts the polygon count, so this can get really out of hand. Notice these black little triangles across the top. Let's hit Weld Core, and that will get rid of those. So it welds it right in the center. So now I've created something like a vase. Now if I wanted to create the interior of that, so let's say that we wanted it to be hollow, I would have to go back to the line itself. So on this, what I would have to do is kind of trace it out as if it had thickness like this. Now there are multiple ways of doing this. Let me go back to lathe again, and let's hit Min. And instead of doing it that way, what I could do is just adjust the amount of segments that we have. Let's go down to something like 8, just to make it very manageable. And let's see, I think that's good there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert it to editable poly. And then I'm going to grab the polygons here along the top, hit delete on that, and then I'm going to use a modifier called shell. Oops, try that one more time. Type in SH for shell, and there we go. And then what I could do is I can actually adjust this inner amount and create thickness on the inside of that. So that's pretty cool. That's one way that we could do it. And it looks like it's got a little out of hand there. It looks like it's not really. Let's do outer amount. That'll probably give us, there we go. That's going to give us a better result. So we have this outer amount, and then I could apply a smoothing algorithm like open subdiv. Okay, and that's going to smooth that out. And we've got something that looks like a nice little vase. And this is all from modeling from a spline. So don't discount them. They have their uses. I could have created this vase by using those polygon methods that we had learned about before. Either way is a completely viable way of creating models. What I'm trying to just get across is that using splines or polygons, they are going to have their uses. It just depends on which one you're most comfortable with, and is it the proper way or the proper use of it? Is it going to be the proper use of your time? Because if we can model something faster in one way, I would rather use it than something that I'm normally used to. So now that we've talked about working with splines, let's talk about smoothing workflows. We've been using this open subdiv workflow, and we also use the chamfer tool to kind of smooth out some corners and things like that. But I want to give a lesson in this because it can be very helpful as we start our modeling process and can make things very easy. And it could also help us to identify some problem areas as we're modeling.